Okay, I am recording. All right. Good evening, everyone. We have had over 1,900 register for this event tonight, and I am proud to present Nancy and Cheryl. I do not have their bios in front of me because I would like them to introduce themselves. I will say Cheryl is one of my moderators and always contributes beautiful thoughts and information to our page. And Nancy, I met during a meetings that we attend on Fridays. So with the what's the institute? Help me out, Nancy. I can't think.
Lytton Lunch.
Lytton Lunch with Barksdale Institute. So without wasting any more time, let's get to the point, and thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you, Donna, and thank you for inviting us to do this webinar. Our introduction of ourselves is going to be very short and sweet, and I wanted to say I'm Cheryl Ferlito. I'm happy to be here with you today, and the information we're going to share with you today, I did not learn in college. I learned from greats like Gay Hess. Some of you just saw her face on the screen. She was one of my mentors many years ago when I was learning to be a language trainer. I also learned so much of what I know from my longtime friend, Nancy Chappell Everhart, and other greats like Dr. Louisa Cook Moats and Dr. Jane Fell Green and Dr. Ann Whitney, and a whole cadre of people that I get to call my friends who taught me what I know today. And I'm still learning that, and now they call it the science of reading. And Nancy.
Well, like Cheryl, I did not learn this in college for sure. And I was thinking earlier today, I learned that a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight on the ground, in the trenches, with people like those that Cheryl's mentioned, Jane Green, who had the insight that kids needed more than just to read words, Marianne Wolf of Ravo, Tori Green from the Language Circle, people who, before the science caught up with why we were doing some of what we were doing, were teaching children this way. And now we just have this expansion of information about why what we're going to talk about tonight is important. So Cheryl, back to you.
Great. So let's look at our agenda. The agenda today starts with our why. Why a word knowledge network? What is this network? How does this network provide information that helps us with purposeful practice? We will show that to you using Sortegories examples and Decodable text examples. And hopefully what we share with you today, you'll be able to apply to information that you have, our products and resources that you have in your classroom. We do hope to have time for questions and answers, as well as responding to the chat. And I just saw a note from another one of my peeps that I have learned so much from, and that is Lynn Kuhn. She's writing in the chat as well. There's a whole group of people that have taught me and many of us some of what we're going to share with you today. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get started with this agenda.
Well, thanks, Cheryl, and welcome everybody. And this is for Gay. So the Word Knowledge Network is what Cheryl and I are calling a graphic that's going to be the anchor for our session today. And it really represents this conceptual framework that was most recently written about in a Reading League journal article that we will be able to provide for you as a door prize for being with us tonight. The Reading League has granted us permission for that. But at the essence of this model is that neuroscience has just confirmed what some of us have been trying to do for years, and that is that the 5 aspects of word knowledge, the orthographic, the phonologic, the morphologic, the semantic, and the syntactic, all are required in order to build that reading circuit. And I'm not sure what that line is. Are you seeing a line on my screen?
Yeah, I just stopped participant sharing. I'm not sure what happened. Are you good?
Well, I just lost, I somehow got out of there. Just a minute, let's go back. Let me share.
I think maybe we were sharing with all participants by accident. I'm not sure.
I don't know. Is that showing up again, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what I was saying is we need all 5 aspects of knowing a word to build this network. And we are going to use a brief clip from someone that we think says this extremely well, namely Dr. Carolyn Strom, who has done a wonderful webinar called Cortex in the Classroom. And she's also granted us permission to use this this clip for us tonight. And I'm hoping that, whoops, it's not wanting to, there we go. I'm lost my cursor. We're going to watch just a brief clip.
Word, because that's what the letterbox responds to, words. So I want us just to take a quick second and think about what is a word. When we say our brain responds to words, what do we mean by a word? Just checking out the chat to see if anyone was sharing what a word is. So my question is, what is a word, right? And how is it processed in the brain? So a word is an interesting thing. A word has 3 forms. One, it has a pronunciation, that, you can say that, and that's just the spoken form, the pronunciation. 2, it has a meaning. When you say that, there's also a correlation. If it's a word, then it also has a meaning, right? But if you're reading or writing a word, then the word also has a spelling. Right? So this is what we mean when we say a word has 3 different forms. A word has its spelling, its pronunciation, and its meaning. And in order to read, these 3 need to fuse into one neural form. So that went a little ahead. So when we learn to read, we're building on spoken language regions. So right now you see that sound and meaning, right, comprise the spoken language region of the brain. When we connect to reading, we are connecting to vision. So this is sort of a cartoon image of what's going on in the brain. We're born, this green bridge represents that we're born with connections between sound and meaning, or the spoken language regions, but there's no connection to vision. Sorry, something's a little bit wrong with my slides. Okay, in order to read, we need to connect spoken language to vision, and we do that by developing 2 new neural pathways. And I'm going to talk about these in a little bit, but the purple and the orange represent new neural pathways that connect the vision representation of the word to the spoken language regions.
Well, we could listen to Carolyn Strom all night, and we recommend that you definitely watch the link that we provided in the SMOR. But what she was just describing is the neuroscience behind this multi-component model that we're talking about. And also recently, as if that wasn't enough, there was an article in the Australian Journal of Learning Difficulties that added another layer of importance to this spoken or oral vocabulary, which we don't often think about, but its importance is that that is our spoken knowledge of words, also contributes to our ability to recognize words starting to read. So there are lots of reasons for us to consider this multi-component model. So as I said a moment ago, what Cheryl and I did as we were working on Sortegories 3.0, which we will be sharing with you today, is we wanted a representation, a graphic representation of all of these components. And we did that by creating this cyclical image to represent that these components are related, and they kind of spiral around and reinforce each other. So how does this work exactly, or what are we talking about? Well, if we're talking about the phonological, and I said the word k, ast, I said those sounds, I would be providing the phonemic representation of that word. But then when we read, we want to do what Dr. Strom was just saying, which is we want to associate each of those sounds, the k, ast, with the letter or letters that represent them. And that's how we get to the written word cast. We also have in here the syllable level. And the reason we have this as a separate, even though it's not part of the 5 components, is that these orthographic units called syllables help to accelerate our ability to translate that orthographic pattern into larger words. So cast is part of castaway, or recast. And when we can recognize those components, we, like with the individual letters, we begin to now process words in larger chunks. And then we go to the semantic level. And this is where that oral language foundation becomes especially important. And if it isn't there, we need to be developing it, because we need to know, is this cast the object we use on a broken bone? Or is this the group of people that put on a play or a movie? Or is this the action, if I'm going fishing, what I do with that fishing rod? Then there's the morphological layer, and this has to do with, are we talking about one, more than one, or are we talking about adding an S or ing when we're making it into a verb, an action? And then last but not least, and perhaps one of the most unsung heroes of all of this and under-taught areas, is the syntactic layer, where words and their meaning really don't come together until we put words into context. Unless I told you that I'm going to cast the line while I go fishing, you wouldn't know which of those multiple meanings I was talking about. It is, in fact, the context of a phrase, a clause, or a sentence that helps us know what we're talking about. But also important in the work that Cheryl and I have done especially through language and our work now with Sortegories, is that critical to all of this is this foundation, a scope and sequence of phonology. Now, there's more than one scope and sequence of phonology, for sure, but whatever one you happen to be using, this is relevant, which is those sound to spelling correspondences that we have at the bottom become those that we use to build the words, and ultimately they become those that we put together to make phrases. And then, of course, where we're headed is to decodable text. So we want to emphasize that what we're talking about tonight is not just these components, but that they are components being played out using this phonological or this phonemic foundation. Important with all of this is that if we are going to achieve this knowledge of the 5 components, it requires systematic and explicit instruction. And we hope that you'll see some of those examples as we move forward. So Cheryl, want to take the next step here?
Absolutely. So how do we use the word knowledge network to guide instruction? So we want assessment to guide our instruction. So think about assessment in 2 buckets. We have assessment of learning and assessment for learning. So if we go into my summer school example, we took our assessment of learning to create instructional group using the 95% group summer material. And then, next click, that guided our instruction with their particular reading, depending on where they were in the instructional process, and adequately assigned practice time. And you'll notice that assess, instruct, practice can go back between instruct, practice, go back to assess. So that's a little bit cyclical depending on what needs to occur. So let's use the word knowledge network to make instructional decisions, and let's just talk about decoding for a moment. Next click, I think. Yeah, okay. So for the 95% group pre-test for the rising first, one of the first things we did with this group was to see, can you tell me the sounds in nap? Nap. From there, can you assign the graphemes? Can you map the sounds to letters for that word in spell nap? That was one of the assessments that we did. In the short vowel group, they were given a word, like the word is ram, and then they were asked to create a chain of words, go from ram to rim to him to ham. Were they able to create that word chain? That was an idea of assessment. If they had difficulty in any of those areas, Or if I had assessments such as in phonemic awareness or phonics at the bottom of the screen from my 95% group, maybe I'm already using, core maybe I'm already using. What are you already using in your school districts that provide some data that you can decide where to go on this word network? For phonics, you might be using letters. You might be using really great reading, star phonics, which used to be called key phonics, or a spelling inventory perhaps.
So part of what we are getting to is not after we know that data and we know that we should be in certain part of this word knowledge network, we certainly want to practice on words out of context, which is that initial ability to go from print to speech. And we definitely want to have our students be able to use and read these words within context. And by the way, this sample is from whole phonics, and I erred on not having that right on this slide. And then in between this, however, and this is where the article and the word knowledge network that we're talking about comes into play. And actually is how Cheryl and I got to know each other and were assigned the task of creating Sortegories these 20-something years ago, was that there needed to be more ways to practice the decodable words based on that phonological scope and sequence. And that is what is represented here. And we've gone on with our new edition of Sortegories to think of those in 3 rows. Those activities that deal with the code, those activities that Cheryl was just describing for assessment. Then we also want to build in this layer that has to do with the meaning of words, relating word relations, categorization, and analogies. And the part that we don't get to often enough are those aspects of knowing words that are greatly affected by being in the context of either a phrase, a clause, or a sentence. So we'd like to give you a few examples from Sortegories this evening, and we're also going to take each one of these and then apply it as well to some decodable text. So first, we're going to look at this example from Sortegories.
Sortegories.
Level A. Map it. First, an important question. Dogs or cats? Meow. This activity has 3 parts. In part 1, you'll listen to a word. Select the audio icon to hear the word again. Then, using the top row only, start at the left and click 1 box for each sound you hear in the word. Click on the Submit button to check your answer. You can use this icon to view an example of this activity. Sometimes you'll see this icon. Use it to view additional help information. A heart symbol indicates words with sound spellings you may not know. Click the heart icon for more information. A yellow heart means you'll learn the way the sound is spelled later. A red heart means you will need to memorize the sound's spelling by heart. For example, the word is bat. Select a box for each sound in the word bat. B, a, t. Then click Submit. Sortegories will show you the letters that spell those sounds. Bat, b, a, t. A red box marks the vowel sound. Now it's your turn. The word is sat. Sat. S, a, t. Sat. The word is at. Oops. Click Try again. The word is at. Not quite. At has two sounds spelled with two letters. At. The word is be. The word is be. The letter E spells E in be. B, B, E, B.
Oops, there we go. Before we move on to the next screen, I just want to make a comment that one of the things we've tried to accomplish in Sortegories 3.0 is to provide feedback, because bad practice or practice without feedback is not constructive. So what you saw us illustrating in that sample were mistakes so that you could see the kind of correction we have to be giving to our children. But every one of the things that we just saw illustrated in that example is what Cheryl's now going to explain using decodable text.
Thanks, Nancy. So how do we use decodable text looking through the lens of this multi-component approach? So here is a text from Whole Phonics. I believe we have Jill Lauren in the house. So Jill, I hope we do this justice. The name of this book is called The Thick Fog. And here's just a short excerpt from The Thick Fog. But then the sun dims, thick fog sets in on the path. So if we want to demonstrate something from phonology here, what might we do? Well, we could say, find the word ick, repeat, and then have students repeat it. And then they would find the word in their book or on their whiteboard, whatever you're doing it. Perfect, great. Now I might say, find another word that begins or ends with a sound. What word might you find? So you might find path in this case. Nice work. Next, you might want to tie in your sound wall, teaching the difference between voiced and voiceless pairs, particularly if you're asking for, and they pointed out the words perhaps then or the. So that would be a way to tie in your sound wall. You can also, if you're teaching heart words, tie in heart words here and ask them to memorize just the heart part.
The letters TH spell th, and the letter E spells in the.
So in this example, the TH on the slide doesn't have the yellow heart because we're already teaching the voiced and voiceless TH. So it is currently decodable at this time. So only the E would get the red heart.
And I think, Cheryl, I'd just like to say this whole area of analyzing words, even those that are not completely regular phonologically, is one of the things that I think we've added to our repertoire as we've been moving forward with this science of reading.
So if we were to continue down this approach, this multi-component approach into syllables, we might consider looking at the first sentence of this excerpt and say, except for the word the, what do you notice in the words in this sentence? You could get a variety of responses. They're one syllables. You might have somebody say they're short vowels. What comes at the end of each of those words? Then they might say a consonant, right? A consonant with a short vowel. Perfect. So you're just talking what those words look like right now to get us to really key us up for some syllable work. Then you might concentrate on a word like sun. If you Can you click? There you go. If you can read sun, then you can read sunny. Read it with me. Sunny, especially for older kids. They need to feel a quick hit that they're not just going to be reading one syllable words, if they can apply that to multi-syllable words. If you can read sun, you can read sunshine. Read it with me, sunshine. Or if they read sun and I read shine. Then you go to the next sentence and you do the same thing with pathway. Then you get to the next one and you read it one syllable at a time and you get empathy. Say it faster, empathy. And that works if the student has auditory recognition of that word. Without it, they're going to have a little bit of difficulty with the word empathy. But that's how you can take it to the syllable level. So going back to our summer school situation, you can also use diagnostic teaching to determine where you are going to be instructing on the word knowledge network. In this case, coming from rising third grade, there is a passage called The Good Deed, and the students will read the passage, and I'll just concentrate on the last two sentences of what's on the screen. There was a cast on his right leg from his thigh to his toes. Whoa, what a sight, I cried. From here, the students are asked, go ahead, Nancy. The students are asked to write a response, but they have to know what words mean in order to make sense of that response. So just in those sentences, look for a moment at some words that your students may not know. Even back up a sentence. Do they know what crutches are?
Mm-hmm.
Do they know what a cast is? Do they know like where your thigh and your toes are, the distance? If you have an EL, a student, for example, they may not know where their thigh is, and they may not realize that that's a really large cast, right? So they really don't know that it's a sight because they don't understand the vocabulary involved in that to create that written response. Also in the 95% group, rising third grade material for summer school, they were concentrating on suffixes. In this particular example, notice that you're in decodable words, right? They're on vowel teams and they're doing the suffixes that they can read these at this point, FUL and less, LESS, and they're asked to understand and write what is the meaning and how can they use that in sentence to demonstrate understanding. So they're taking morphology and putting it to use in isolation and then in context. So that's how morphology could be used with decodable text.
So as we move into semantics and morphology, it really reminds us of this distinction that Kane and Oakhill are making, which is the difference between breadth of knowledge of words versus the depth. And as we move into semantics, we want to get into how can we help children build networks of meaning and understanding of those words. So that moves us to the second row of Sortegories and an activity that works with the concept of, or the activity of classification, that is sorting words into semantic groups. So let's take a look at this activity and show you how this works.
First, an important question.
In this activity, you'll drag the words that appear here and drop them on the correct category. Select the audio icons to listen to each category. At any time, you may drag words from one category to another. When no more words appear, click Submit to check your answer. You can use this icon at the top to view an example, or use the glossary icon to see pictures and meanings for the words in this activity. For example, drag the first word to the correct category and drop it. Now do the same for the second word. At any time, you can move words from one category to another. Repeat until no more words appear. Click Submit to check your answer. Words in the correct category will appear in blue. Words in red are not in the correct category. Don't worry, you'll have a second try to get as many words correct as you can. Now it's your turn. Drag each word to the correct category.
And I'm going to do this for us. So bat is the first word. Cats is the next word. Cam, Matt, that's a name. Sam, Abs, that's, yeah. Tam is a name. Cat, okay, Cab, and Matt. We have the name 2 times, and so I'm going to submit my answer.
Good try.
Uh-uh.
Words in blue are in the right category. Try again with the words in red.
So I'm going to take advantage of my glossary here and look up these 2 words I missed and see if I can have a better idea of what they are.
Select a word to see and hear the definition.
So here's that word.
Cast, a
Ah.
stiff bandage for a broken bone.
Okay, it's not cats, it's cats. And then the other one I missed was this.
Mat, a small piece of carpet for the floor.
Oh, here's the other mat.
Mat, a name.
Okay, so I should have known that was a capital. Okay, so now I can go back and fix these. Mat is neither and cast is neither. And then submit.
Great job. All 10 words are correct.
Wonderful. You earned a ribbon. Click a pet to feed it. When you are done, click.
Here are your results.
Which is printable, and
Thank you. For every 10,000 points scored on Sortegories, we will make a donation to feed rescue animals. The more points you earn, the more we can help together.
so through that activity, with the help of the glossary, we're trying to meet students where they might be in terms of that vocabulary knowledge. And we're certainly trying to, whether they're language-based learning issues, English learners, or just an unfamiliar word, we want to provide that kind of support. And then the other activity in that middle row is analogy building. And what we're trying to have children, and sometimes, we talk about our continuum of learners. Well, some of our students will be working on decodable vocabulary, but maybe are ready for a little more of a challenge. And we think analogies help to provide that. And here's a brief example of analogies, of an analogy.
Cut is to bandage, as break is to oops. Click try again. Cut is to bandage, as break is to a cut is covered by a bandage. Correct. Cut is to bandage, as break is to cast.
And again, we're trying wherever possible to support the reading part of this with visuals where we think that the students will need that kind of support. So with that, I think I'm continuing on here. We can, again, apply some of those very same activities to the decodable text. For example, we could, similar to the categorize it activity, we could say, which word is a kind of weather in this text? And hopefully you'd say the word fog. We could then go on and say, can you think of any other words that are weather words? And they may not be in the text, but we can build that network around the word fog. Another example would be to look at a word relationship that's represented in the text and which word is an antonym for thin. And hopefully they would choose the word thick, and we could possibly ask for another antonym or another. We go on to do synonyms and other relationships between words. And then, Cheryl, I think we switch over here.
So the next is vocabulary and context. So we looked at vocabulary in isolation, right? What do words mean? And now what do they mean? Some words we have to have context to understand the meanings, right? So we're going to go ahead and watch this video that shows Jennifer, who is the speech pathologist. She taught kindergarten. She also taught second grade in a private setting.
Whoops.
Level A. Morph sort.
Good. Let's start off by clicking that help button. And then click play for each of the directions to give us a reminder of what we're going to do.
One means singular, which is one person, place, or thing. Adding S to a namer makes it plural, which means more than one.
Okay, now you can go ahead and click the X. And I want you to say your sounds and read out loud every word.
Asked. Cabs. Set.
Okay, good job. Before you click submit, I'm gonna take a turn with the mouse and tell me about these words over here in this category that is all under the bucket of one. Why did you put all those words here in one?
Because all of these ones could be like more than one, because it'd be casts and bats and mats and facts.
So cast, how many are there?
And cast what?
In the word cast, how many are there?
There is one.
One, that's right. How about in the word mat?
One.
That's right, they're talking about one mat. So now in the middle, this category is more than one. How do you know these words are more than one?
Because cabs, like it's cabs, it's more than one. And
How do you know
cats
that?
is more than one, and axe is more than one too.
That's right, you're right that they're all more than one. What is added on to that word so you know that it's talking about more than one cab?
Because you had an S at the end.
That's right. And then, good job. Let's start by reviewing the directions.
Ownership means belongs to. Adding apostrophe S to a namer makes it possessive, which means it belongs to that namer. The dog's tree is a bone. The dog owns the bone.
So Tommy, whose bone is that?
The dog's bone.
The dog's, and you know that because there was an apostrophe S, right? So that signifies ownership. All right, click the next one, more than one.
Adding S to a namer makes it plural, which means more than one.
All right, go ahead and start the activity. I want you to read those words out loud to me.
Bands. Flags. Mans. Ants. Figs. Films. Gas.
Good job. Okay, before we check our answers, don't click it just yet. I want to ask you this first category of ownership. This word right here, mans. Can you think of something that the man might own?
The man's suitcase.
The man's suitcase. Good job. So now in this bucket, more than one, why are these words in the more than one bucket?
Because they don't have like an apostrophe S, they just have S at the end.
Right, and the S at the end, what does that tell us?
There's more than one.
There's more than one. So pick a word in there that you could put in a sentence for me to show that it has more than one.
Flags. There is 3 flags outside.
Perfect. Go ahead, check your answers.
Wonderful. You earned a ribbon.
One of the things I'd like to just comment on before we move on, Cheryl, is that when the focus in Sortegories and work that you can do with any decodable sets of words, this idea of sorting is to have the students look for minimal distinctions like the S versus apostrophe S. Because if their students aren't able to do that, as Tommy was able to explain and learn to explain, they're not likely to be reading as accurately when they get into connected or decodable text, or any text for that matter. So Cheryl, I'm sorry,
No, that's a great point. And also a comment in the chat box is Sortegories providing diagnostic assessment? No, but as you can see what Jennifer is doing during this tutoring session, if you will, she's providing diagnostic teaching using Sortegories. You could do the same thing with decodable text. She's really going through this word knowledge network and the domains of it to see where is Tommy lacking and where does he need instruction. So she used Sortegories as a vehicle to get to that, to change it up for him. He's a little bit older and he needed some variety. So she started using Sortegories to change it up, but still providing the direct instruction through that. So you can do that with anything. It was just her way of putting a different spin on Sortegories, which we appreciated. So next, sticking with the same excerpt from the book that we're using. Nancy, if you'll click one more time, I lost track a little bit. Okay, so we're in morphology, right? So if you look at the first sentence, but then the sun dims, the thick fog sets. Okay, so we've got some S's on those words. This particular activity could come before or after, let's say, the Sortegories lesson that you just saw. But are those S's? Does that mean that there's plural? Does that mean why? Yes or no, why or why not? And those conversations would continue to have discussing that. So we also can take the same thing to syntax. So syntax is about word function, the grammar, word order, the syntax, and its impact on comprehension and writing. So Nancy's right. This is an area that isn't talked about enough. And Nancy, you'll have to let me know if I do it justice, because she really is the queen of syntax. This came from one of the queens of syntax. This came from Short Vowels from 95% group. And it is a passage that the students need to read and then answer some questions. But they're not all simple sentences. Like one of the new cubs has a bad leg and must eat. He fed the cubs and set the bad leg. So first of all, talk about vocabulary in context before we get to syntax. Set the bad leg? Like, what does that mean? You know, that's a really hard thing for kids to understand. So Sis has a job as a what? As a vet. Do they know what a vet means, right? Where do they find the cubs? So where are the cubs? The where is the syntactic part. Like, do you know what phrase answers where? And can you put that in a sentence? What did they do to help the cubs? Did they just do one thing or more than one thing? Can you get both things in one sentence and combine it with the word and? So that's a more complex sentence structure that we need to be teaching. This is just an example out of the pre-test, again, that we gave for summer school using 95% group short vowels. So how does Sortegories do it? We'll ask kids to create a phrase, a particularly dictated phrase, and then ask them what phrase that particular phrase, what question does that particular phrase answer? And then we'll review the heart words that are currently in play during that unit. And this is Jennifer with Brooklyn.
Build the cat.
Okay, so you're gonna build phrases. And I want you to know that phrases are a group of words and we use them to build sentences. So these phrases are going to be parts of sentences, okay? So we're going to click this and listen again for what it told you to build, okay?
Build the cat.
So it said build the cat. So you're going to find the words with your mouse and you're going to drag them to build the cat. Great job. You built the phrase, the cat. Can you read that?
The cat.
Good. Now click submit.
What question does this phrase answer?
So now we're going to click the help information. It's the question mark at the top of your screen, and we're going to see how this part works. So go ahead and click play.
What did it? Tells us the name of the thing or object. The cab stopped. What stopped? The cab. What did it do? Tells us the action that the thing or object did. The dog ran. What did it do? It ran.
And so our phrase is the cat. So we put words together to make meaning. So a group of words can answer a certain question. So we're going to figure out what phrase this question answers. So the first option is what did it? And when we're thinking about that question, it's going to tell us a name of a thing or an object. So does this phrase, the cat, tell us a name of a thing? Yes, the cat is the thing. So go ahead and click what did it? And then click submit.
Okay. Cheryl, am I
Oh,
doing?
Yep, so continuing along, we're going to talk about decodable text we're still in syntax. So if we look at this, you can click one more time, Nancy. If you look at this, one more. But then the sun dims. What did the sun do? So we want kids to be able to answer the word dims. Now we're back in vocabulary if they don't know what dims means, right? So you see how we're not always in one area here. The next one. What set in? So look at the word set that we've just used today. You know, we had our cast set a few slides back, and now the sun is set, the fog is setting in. What does that mean? But what set in? The fog, of course. And then what phrase tells where? So, you know, we want kids to be able to take us apart a sentence and be able to know what question that answers. That will help them with reading comprehension. It will also help them with sentence expansion.
And the other thing as I was watching Jen with Brooklyn is to remember that these same questions keep cycling around again and again with each new text. So once we start to work on these questions that help students isolate the phrases or the clauses within the text, we're building the foundation for what will become the prosody for their reading, which will contribute to their understanding.
And then just globally, how does Sortegories do it? If you look at the whole word knowledge network, there are specific activities underneath each area on this particular graphics. So if you have a student who's having trouble, particularly with decoding, you may want them in phonology, sound, symbol, and syllables, but you don't want to stay there. I think that's our point. Even if they're having trouble in decoding, we still want you working in semantics, morphology, and syntax. But if you have students who are very good at decoding and they're fluent in reading with prosody and with good inflection, and they're really having trouble in the area of semantics, morphology, and syntax, and that's where you will go on the word network, whether you're in Sortegories or in your own material.
So one of the things that comes to mind as we are talking about all of this is, and all of the information that Cheryl was talking about with regards to using assessment data from whatever the sources are that you have, is to be strategic and deliberate about what part of the network your particular students need. And we think that Nancy Young's ladder of reading and writing help to really remind us that students and their needs exist on a continuum. And part of what helps us know where to plug into that continuum for the learner and what we're trying to teach is to use that kind of assessment information and to know that there are many layers of word knowledge that we need to teach. So we thank Nancy Young for always reminding us that we have students with a great range of needs, not always in the negative direction, not always struggling, but kids who maybe need something that's a little more challenging or accelerated as well. So why is this word knowledge network important? It's been important to us as we've worked on our reboot of Sortegories, because Sortegories is all about practice. And we think that that practice is what, as Vaughn and Fletcher and Seidenberg are saying, is what is helping us build this reading circuit. And without the practice and strategic practice, we're not going to build as effective or efficient a network. And so we'd like to bring a close by coming back to this Reading League Journal article and hit this point, which is that the most important principle in this multi-component approach is that the more a student learns about the words they encounter and how those words function in sentences, the more fluent they become and the better they comprehend these words across context. And by implication, that means, from our point of view, that means the more we as teachers need to be aware of what those components are, how to look for activities that in isolation work on that, but really importantly to make the most of the decodable text or eventually authentic text that you have to help students really build out all of those connections. We had the privilege of working on a really fabulous program, but the principles behind the program you can do with virtually any of the material if you have this mindset. So with that, we want to say thank you. And Cheryl?
Yes, thank you so much. So if you go on our website and you go under the Science of Reading tab, you will find a free printable, which has the layers of the word knowledge network that you may like. Also, if I would like to answer, and Nancy helped me answer a couple of questions in the chat box.
Oh, good.
One is, could it be used for small group instruction for unfinished learning? Sortegories is in its 3rd edition. I taught the language curriculum, and Sortegories was a supplement to the language curriculum in the 1st and 2nd versions of Sortegories. As a classroom teacher, I used Sortegories every way. I used it on a smartboard, and we they called it the game show, and I taught 6th grade, and then later I taught 9th grade. So I used it on a smartboard, and then they would go back individually and they would work on it themselves. So they would actually do it twice. So could it be practiced after small group instruction and helping with unfinished learning? Absolutely. Another question, Nancy, maybe you could go back to the ladder to answer this question was,
before you go on, I just wanted to make one other connection to what you just said. I also think what we saw Jennifer doing with Brooklyn and Tommy, they did that in a very directed way with Jennifer. But after they did it in that way, they could then go and do it again independently and see if they are remembering the key information and just that additional opportunity. So anytime we can move from that direct instruction to another round is good practice. And yes, I will go back to the ladder. Go ahead, Cheryl.
So the question is, and I thought we might use the ladder to illustrate the answer here, is Sortegories for tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 intervention? And I just want to say it depends, because you saw like the analogies, right? So think about students who could use the analogies. And if we just use the color of the ladder to illustrate that, we could have kids in the green on the analogies, but we could have kids in the lower end needing more help in the red or the orange. And it could be in tier 2, and it could be practice in tier 1. So I want to just say yes to all of them, depending on its need. And what does your data say? And what type of practice does your student need? The bottom line is, whether it's Sortegories or something else, most of our kids are starving for practice. They're getting the instruction, but they're not necessarily getting enough practice to make it stick. And that's what we're finding. So we're hoping that Sortegories will fill that practice gap, if you will.
Right. And along those lines, again, Cheryl used the point of using Sortegories on a smart board where with a whole class or a small group. The follow-up could then be for students to go and do it again, or to show the question and have the students write an answer on their own little whiteboards or wipe-off boards, and then show the answer. So there's more than one way to use it. It was designed to be an individual practice, but there's no reason that with technology being what it is at this point, that there couldn't be small or whole group applications. And
Right.
when it comes to the vocabulary part, where the glossary comes into play or the hints, we just think these are opportunities for oral language work that that is so important. There's a lot of evidence that we need to spend more time on that.
For sure. Another question is, can activities be individually assigned to students? That's really where we are right now. We're working with an LMS to work out some of those details. One thing we can say, at least this is our plan at this time, is that they can be done as many times as they can be repeated. So it's not like they do it once and it's not a one and done situation. That's how we're different than many other web-based practice sites. So we don't have some of those details fleshed out, but we're working on it and we hear you. How do we get the article from the Reading League? That will come with permission from the Reading League. We were so excited when it came out. We were like, oh my gosh, this is like written for us. We were so excited. That will come in your email with the recording. So that will be sent. And then just some thank yous. So thank you for all of that. Other questions? We have just a couple more minutes. You can write it in the chat box or unmute yourself if you're feeling up to it. But thank you for being here. I weathered the storm, literally. The storm was going on behind me, so hopefully you didn't hear too much thunder. So thank you for being here, whatever you're having, whatever's going on at your home. A cheat sheet of routines so teachers could become familiar with the practices.
So are you asking?
I think that's
questions
on our website.
Yeah.
I think that's on our website. You go to Science of Reading. You go to Sortegories and you hit the Science of Reading tab and go all the way to the bottom, and there's a free printout there for you. We'll put a link to that in our email that we send out as well, or directions on how to get there, but that's there for you. Yes, someone is making that comment that a student with dyslexia, their word bank grows exponentially through countless exposures. And that's what we're really looking for. We're looking for how many exposures can we get in how many ways. It's not repeating the same thing over and over, but can we hit it in phonology? Can we hit it in vocabulary? Can we hit it in morphology, syntax, over and over, making sure we're reading about it and writing about it. Let's see. How much is too much for child to grasp in any given lesson? I wish I had the magic answer for that one. Depends on the kids. Watch for their cues, really. They'll pretty much tell you based on their reaction. Darlene is agreeing on the star for practice. I totally agree. Yeah, kids just need more practice. They just need to do that. Lynn, Make It Stick by Peter Brown. So true. So true. I love that. And she's also talking about Charles Perfetti, the lexical quality hypothesis, layers of language. All good connections, Lynn, as usual. Oh, that was a direct message. Now I told you all. I didn't catch that part, but you're right, Lynn. Thank you. Lynn's always teaching me. She's still teaching me. I so appreciate it. Well, I would just like to, it's 8 o'clock, and to honor everyone's time, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. And from stormy Michigan for being here and learning with us. And we continue to learn from you all and hope to hear from you soon. And we'll make sure we'll get the recording and some other resources out to you via email. Thank you, Donna, again, for hosting and
You're welcome.
Continuing to teach others.
Everybody, it's a what is it? It takes a village type of thing.
Oh, and it does. It does take a village, and our Science of Reading village, I think, continues to grow and get stronger, and we just need to keep rowing the boat in the same direction, and we're going to do great.
That's right.
good things for kids.
Okay, good night, everyone.
Thanks, Donna.
You.
You're welcome. Thank you. It was excellent.
Thank you.